Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the overview. So today we're going to be reviewing Elden Ring Nightreigne. There's going to be a bit to get through here, so I'm thankful we're doing my longer form content. I can take time to break it down and explain it, which this game requires. And deserves, by the way. I'll plant my flag. I think this is excellent and it has consumed me. I've had to pull myself away from the game to do this video. And credentials, I put a ceiling on my playtime with games so as it doesn't get away from me. I can't afford to put 500 hours into every single release. I like to cover lots of new releases. So at the time of this recording, I put about 19, 20 hours in. That's usually about where I'll pull up stumps just to render a bit of a verdict. I've clocked it a couple of times, if you want to call it clocking, because it is a roguelite. It's kind of just run-based, right? The run itself is the fun, and that's actually a really big pressure point where we're getting some pushback and backlash. This is a very high-profile release. It's a Souls-like game that's not a Souls-like game. I'm not trying to be difficult or confusing, but such is the case here, it is a confusing release, and it's drawing the ire of the core Elden Ring fan base. Now, I'm not saying that the game's not for them, but I can also, I have sympathy. I understand the perspective of, hey, I'm a Souls-like player, that's all I do. Why isn't this Elden Ring 2.0? Because this isn't even Elden Ring 1.5. This is in almost name only and assets only and some very basic fundamentals of gameplay. That's all that really makes this any Souls-like at all. It's very much a roguelike game. Which again, there's probably people here, hello, by the way, welcome, that have no idea what a roguelike is. This is all very indie and outside of mainstream appeal. And we haven't seen this sort of backlash or this kind of attempt since something like Returnal. Returnal, which is, a AAA PlayStation budget game that was a roguelite as well, and it got very similar backlash on its release. People being frustrated, why am I playing for half an hour and then I die and you take everything off me and make me start again? They don't really get the merit of a roguelike. So look, this isn't necessarily meant to be a lecture or a history lesson on roguelites per se, but just know that this is an unusual genre, and if you've looked it up and you're like, oh, why is this getting so much backlash? It's got like 30,000 reviews and 2/3 of them are positive. Again, that's a big part of where it's coming from. It's not to say that people are wrong, but I think for multitudinous reasons, they are miffed that it's not what they perhaps wanted it to be. But look, for my part, someone who loves roguelikes, and I play all the Souls-like games, this is kind of a dream come true. I love it. Anytime that you get a AAA profile roguelike type game in front of eyeballs, I think that's really cool. So look, what we'll do is, I think I'll just walk through what a run would go like. So a breakdown of the moment to moment, get the fundamentals out of the way so there's no real confusion, and then you got a bit of a grasp of what's going on. So look, the idea is that you just start off in a lobby, you can queue up to be part of a random party, or you can have, 3 mates queued together, but the game is designed to be 3-player co-op fundamentally. And even if you're a pretty good player at this, right, let's say you have a particular blinder run with a really good carry gear set, it's actually very difficult to carry. If you've got people that, it's their first run ever and they just do not understand what's going on, they're running into the blue and dying and that sort of stuff, you can't save them from themselves. I can understand the frustration and all that, but look, the runs only go for 20 minutes in that case, then you do another one, and I don't particularly mind it. Again, in the spirit of roguelike, it doesn't faze me, but also I understand people's frustration. The best value of this is queuing up with a bunch of mates that have a similar mindset, an open mind. Anyway, you queue in, you kind of do a fortnight glide in. There's only very little agency at the beginning of where you land anyway. But know that you go into the Elden Ring world map and you get plonked down somewhere randomly on its periphery. And then from there you hit the ground running. At level 1, you're absolutely a pushover, zero fragile as anything. It's very easy to get killed and wiped. You have to pick your first steps very carefully. But at this point, the meta layer is that you essentially just need to roam the map under your own strategic direction. After a little bit of time, you'll get an audio cue, some nominal text like the Nightreigne is coming, or something like that, and you will get what is best described as a PUBG circle mechanic, if you remember playing that when Battle Royales hit the scene. So it'll put a smaller circle somewhere on the world map, and it will start closing the outer circle in, and if you find yourself caught in that circle, you're in all sorts of trouble. It will sap your health bar fairly quickly, You can, risk it for the biscuit in some cases, but generally speaking, once you hear that audio cue, you want to run into the center circle. And you can look at your compass at the top of the screen and it will show you like an Erdtree symbol, which is the center of the circle you're going to. Essentially, running straight to that Erdtree symbol is the straightest line from point to point to get you safe. So that's probably a good method. So are you with me so far? You drop in, you've got your group of dudes, you start off really basic starter gear and no XP. You kill some guys, you come up with your own bloody system, a bell will ring, and then you have to go into the smaller circle, right? Then you do that again. I'm pretty sure it's twice, and then it puts you in a final circle after X time and shrinking that circle again. At which point, you should be kind of leveled up a little bit. You should have some gear. We'll come back to that a bit in a minute, but I'm just getting the broad meta play out of the way. And then in this final circle, you'll fight some sort of trash mobs. You'll be locked in. It's kind of, at that point, it's in it for the biscuit. So if you get knocked down, you can't time out. Normally in the open world map, if you get knocked down and someone doesn't revive you in time, you die and respawn elsewhere, and then you have to go grab your souls. In the final circle, let's call it, that doesn't happen. You just keep crawling around needing revive until either you get revived or all three of you go down. If all three of you go down in a final circle scenario, that's the end of the game and you get wiped back to the lobby. So yeah, it'll spawn in a sort of random boss. I mean, they're drawn from a table and they're a bit predictable, and it depends on the run you're doing and the final boss you've chosen to verse. So there are some variables, but essentially a semi-predictable final boss will rock up and you have to beat. And if you beat him, you get your rewards, blah, blah, blah. This sort of wind sweeps through and it resets the world map, and you do day 2. So day 2 is an exact rinse and repeat. Well, not exact, there's more bosses and stuff like that roaming around the world map, but it starts the whole method over again. No circle, then first circle, then second circle, then final circle. So you do it all again for another day, all the while trying to level your character up, get you better gear. You're just trying to zoom up to ready for the final boss. Anyway, at the end of day 2, same thing. You fight a final boss in that circle, you beat that final boss, and then you go into like a final portal. For day 3, you go to a totally different instanced world, and you fight the big bad of the run. You beat him, you win. All of this, easier said than done. I've only beaten it a couple of times. I've had a lot of great runs and just as many that have finished on the final boss because honestly, we just weren't skilled up enough. This game is very fast and it's very punishing, but incredibly rewarding if you know what you're doing, and not just from a Souls-like moment-to-moment gameplay, because that's all there, obviously. Guard counters and staggers and dodges, iframes, blocking, parries. All of that stuff's in there, and all different classes. You've even got like a Sekiro dude I barely played, where he's all about parrying with a gimmicky ninja sword, right? But you've also got casters and tanks and hybrid. So there's something for everyone, and honestly, I actually played the caster a lot, which is really weird. I don't play magic in Dark Souls ever, so it was a cool experience for me being really outside of my shell. But even just doing like guard counter builds were exceptionally fun. But on top of that, you can be the best Souls-like player. The nature of the roguelite parts of this, i.e. the world leveling and you trying to level with it and also trying to optimize some sort of build through the RNG dealt to you, if you manage to tackle that well and understand roguelite or roguelike in this case, because it's run contained, but if you understand how a roguelike works and how best to optimize the run and get as much out of it as possible, you can make absolute steamroll monster builds that will carry, as best as one can, but carry you through the run. This is to say that if you just go in stubbornly as an Elden Ring player and you refuse to engage with the roguelike elements and adapt to them, you're probably not going to win. You're not going to carry randoms, and you're going to get frustrated. You have to embrace the roguelike aspect. Anyway, so that's what a run looks like. When you drill down in this moment to moment, God, this is going to be tricky, right? Where do we start with this? Okay, so there are 2 vectors. There are 2 important parts. One is gear and one is leveling, right? Let's start with leveling. That might be a bit easier to dissect. So it's sort of similar to Souls-like leveling in the first place. in that, you go around, you kill dudes, you get souls. You know, that soul counter goes in the corner, and if you die, you're going to drop souls, right? So this is familiar. Where it changes is you want to go to these things, sites of grace. They're marked on your map. They're bonfires. That's what I know them as. And you want to weave them in and out. Now, not only do they instantly heal you and all your mana and all that sort of stuff, that's very helpful, but you can level up at them. And at the top left of your screen, you like character level, you can see an arrow saying you're ready to level up. So you got to keep an eye on that because, like I said, I have to stress, this is very fast. Even for a roguelite, the pace you have to set in this game is breakneck. You have to really be sweating the whole time. And when you're picking up gear and going through it and all that, you just cannot drag. You can't drag. But if you can level up, you need to find a site of grace and get over there. And all you really do is spam the use button, right? Depending on your character, you know, if I pick the mage chick, it's going to auto slot into your stat lines, probably more like intelligence and faith. And you're only going to level up so many times during a run. Like 11 or 12 by final boss is kind of normal. If you're particularly efficient, maybe more. And if you kind of drop the ball, which is more likely, maybe less. But you know, if you think about it over the course of the run, 10 or 11 levels, and they kind of exponentially scale with stats, you really need to get those levels in. And the difference between, you know, early farming mobs and even that first level, you're going to level up probably within the first 60 seconds. If you're quick, you do the first camp, get to a bonfire, but that jump makes you so much more unstoppable than if you stayed at level 1. So you have to stay on top of your levels. So yeah, you pretty much just go over and you spam and you level up immediately. If you die, you drop your souls, but you also lose a level and you drop a level's worth of souls on that spot as well. This can create a death spiral if you're silly, if you keep running back blindly to take those souls and you die and then you drop them and it deletes the last lot, just like a Souls-like game does. So sunk cost fallacy is what will end most runs. You have to understand that you've wasted too much time on this random, what they call field boss. You know, it'll be a random boss working around the world and you and your group honestly aren't high enough level to fight it. You shouldn't be fighting it. You've made a mistake. You've already put 5 minutes into fighting it. The wall's coming in. You've lost a set of souls. You've lost a level. And yet you guys keep feeding back into that boss? No. That's how you lose runs. That's how everyone loses runs. You accept that you lost those levels. You accept that it's all over and done. And you just move on. You lose the 5 minutes, you lose those souls, you try and make it up somewhere else. So yeah, that's sort of how the leveling system works and, you know, some cautions you need to pay attention to. And from that kind of tails into the world map, which is quite readable. There's different locations and you'll learn what they do. I don't really want to get into everything because as much as I want to help people understand what's going on here, figuring it out for yourself is a big part of it too. But you know, you can use an info toggle to figure out what's what. You will start to memorize what some of these locations have, but like going after specific weapon racks is usually a pretty good idea, especially if you're on comms and maybe one of your players is having a hard time, they haven't found a good weapon that suits them. You know, maybe you try and find bows or staves or whatever. Different locations offer up different things. There are like ruined church areas which will have an Estus flask charge and all you got to do is run over to them and pick it up and you've got a permanent upgrade. But again, you're probably not farming XP when you do that. So is it really worth it? And some of my best runs have been low Estus runs. I don't know what else to call them because we've focused more on farming and getting higher XP than trying to get the safety net of health flasks. Also, you know, there are different areas, there are these like churches where you can go into the basement and fight a boss, but that can be a bit tricky because once you go in the basement, pretty much the only way out is killing the boss. So you gotta be careful what you bite off there. There are forts. And they will have like an information table where it will show you where the dung beetles, I don't know what they're called, I call them dung beetles, but they're essentially like these little treasure goblin dudes that push their little ball of shit around and it'll show where they are on the map, or hidden treasure chests as well. And the dung beetles themselves drop relics, which are a rare type of equipment you can't get anywhere else. So if you want to max out your build, you need to get them. You have to listen out for the audio cue. And like I said, the best way to find them is to go to a fort and get a map update from that. There are shops, you can upgrade your gear through the different colors. There's pretty much only 3 colors, gray, blue, purple. You can go to gold, but we won't even get into that here. But my point for illustrating all of this is, you hit the ground running and you go, where do we go next? What do we do? And also, without getting too spoilery, because once you beat the first run, the first boss, you will unlock a whole bunch of other bosses, like 6 or 7 of them, and you can pick which boss you queue against. And you can queue against multiple as well, which is good because that solves the problem of having split hoppers. That was something I was worried about. If you're not aware, that's a way to kill your game, no matter how big it is if you have 20 different queue types with no overlap, you dilute your player base, which is cancer for a game that needs a multiplayer player base. But you can go, I want to queue up for these 5 dudes and just get me in one of them, right? But it will tell you, like, the first dude is weak to poison. And so you can see poison locations and you can go, all right, well, maybe we go over there, try and get a poison affixed bow going into the final boss, right? So my point is, there's a layer of build craft and run craft, there's a term, that's probably exactly what you should call it, that has to be considered. All right, I want to go to this location or that location. We've only got so long before the circle closes in. Sticking to the outer edge of the map is sensible because the circle will push you in. But of course, it's a little bit more dangerous because, maybe the next circle's on the other side of the map, which will make the pace that the circle closes on you faster. But this is stuff that people have probably encountered in PUBG, with the general loot mechanics and mentality in a PUBG run. You could argue that PUBG itself is a roguelite in a way as well. There's definitely a lot of overlap here. So yeah, you have to plan out what you're going to do, how you're going to optimize everyone's gear in the party, get everyone leveled up, get everyone geared up, get a bit of a build happening for the finale. And then there's the gear side, which I didn't talk about. Like I said, there was a split between leveling and gear. On the gear side, most shockingly for most people would be that there is no gear in armor. There's no armor set pieces or anything like that. It's all just weapons that you hold. However, those are treated like armor set pieces, and that might be one of the things that so many people just still don't understand. I'll look in the final screen at what people are holding in their inventory. It shows you other players' sheets, and half the inventory is empty. And it's like, oh my god, you just pick random stuff up, man. Just fill your inventory and then optimize it. Because each weapon will have its moveset, right? So if it's a great sword, there's certain ways you can attack with it. And I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. This is all very Elden Ring old hat. And the weapon will have, whatever you call it, weapon arts. I think weapons are called armaments in Elden Ring. I hate all the jargon, whatever, right? You got a weapon, and the weapon will have a special attack attached to it, and that'll be totally random. You might have a great sword, and I have a great sword. They're identical swords. They have totally different arts attached to them. I might have a ground slam, and you might have a quick step or whatever, and the same goes for wands and all that sort of stuff. So there's huge variance in that, but kind of more importantly, is every weapon will have a passive associated with it, and the passive works as long as it's in your inventory. That's so important that so many people just don't read the screen when it comes up. So your character can carry like 3 weapons in each hand, right, and rotate between them. That's your inventory, and this is Souls-like sort of mentality anyway. So maybe you've got your great sword, and maybe you're two-handing it. Maybe that's all you really give a shit about. You've got the two-hand great sword moveset. That's great. The other 5 slots all have passives, and they will be things like increase the damage you do when two-handing. And that might be a short bow, which you're never going to use, right? You might have a wand in your backpack that reduces the skill cost of FP. So maybe you can use the skill for your two-handed weapon cheaper because of it, because of a wand in your backpack with a passive, but you're never going to use the wand. So you have to understand that the buildcraft relies on that, and every piece of gear may well be an important, like I said, you might pick up a bow as a melee dude, and yet it has a passive on it that's so helpful to you specifically. And that's how it all ties together. So you really want to try and keep on track of leveling up, not overcommitting to bosses or areas that you as a group, honestly, in your heart of hearts, are just not ready to fight. You have to know when to pick your battles because you have to overcome them in a timely manner. Okay, yeah, maybe you can beat that tree sentinel out there, but it's going to take you 5 whole minutes when you should honestly go fight something else and come fight him in, 10 minutes and beat him in 30 seconds. That's a bit extreme, but I think you understand my point. You need to be farming at the appropriate level, and you need to have your gear built out as well. So look, that's pretty much how the game works, all in all. You do these runs, most of them you're going to get wiped on, the day one boss or whatever, as you and your mates are figuring out what you're doing, or as you play with randoms. At least for PC, there's a pretty handy way to just add random people as friends. I can understand some people's frustration saying there's no voice comms. I would counter with that. I think giving voice comms to the Elden Ring community would be a fucking terrible idea. Just going off of all the negativity and some of the nuts I've played with. But look, generally speaking, I've had a pretty good time of in the post-game screen. You can tell, even if they're beginning or whatever, you can get a feel for other players and if they're in the same sort of orbit as you. And you can just pull up their Steam profile and send them a friend request, which I've done plenty. And so I've got a bunch of random friends from Russia and fucking Korea and all that, and whoever it was matchmaking me with, and I've been queuing up with them, These nameless, voiceless, cross-country barrier and language people, but hey, they're my Elden Ring buddies that I play with now, and it's fun. And all you really need is a ping system, which you can use on the map. You can confirm other people's pings. So, if I ping one of these bloody spirit jails or whatever they're bloody called, because I've got a key, another bloke, he can double up on my ping, and then the third bloke feels peer group pressured into it, and all of a sudden you've got a 2/3 vote, and everyone starts working together. And it's very rare where you get some stubborn dickhead run off on his own, trying to, trailblaze without getting with the program. So look, I've had a really good experience with it. I understand people's anecdotal, negative, unpleasant time with it, but I also would ask that you have an open mind, because there's a difference between being angry at the game because it's not what you want it to be, because with that I can't really help you. But also, if you engage with it on fair play and you still don't like it, that's fair play, I understand. But I think if you approach it with an open mind, like I said, only half the time I played with some mates. The other time I played with randoms, picked up random friends along the way, had a great time, and again, because I really think it's that I had the right mindset. I'm not trying to carry water or simp for it or anything like that, but I also recognize that it's a very high skill ceiling, very difficult Souls-like type game with a layer upon it of difficult roguelike mechanics, and a layer on top of that being that the community probably wasn't expecting that, and it's all very new for them. So when you take all that and you mix it all together, I think with the right mindset, you'll recognize this is as good as you could possibly get for it. And the other option would have been what? Like a PvP only multiplayer Souls-like game? I have no interest in any of that crap. Or what? A co-op boss rush that is pretty much just a copy-paste of the co-op boss mode in every other Souls-like games? No, I think this is probably the best thing that they could possibly have done. And yeah, there's going to be some teething and growing pains, and maybe its legacy turns out to point out that you just never should make Souls-like games co-op full stop. I don't know, but for my time with this, I've really enjoyed it, and it's one of my most fun games of the year. And I would recommend it to just about anyone, but I would caution that you need to have an open mind. If you're a stubborn Souls-like player and you're going to refuse to open your mind up to non-Souls-like mechanics, maybe not. If you are quick to anger and blame the community and all that, maybe not, right? But if you can accept that it's a very, very tough, almost avant-garde combining of mechanics that creates for a lot of early-ended runs because people are still figuring out what they're doing and what this even is, then there's a real special experience in here. And it would be such a shame to sleep on it just because someone had a tantrum online and you took it too seriously. Anyway, look, that's my Night Rain review. The game is excellent. I really hope that me being a bit more science report and breaking it down to the fundamental parts has been helpful for some. Do let me know. I don't want to condescend or over-explain, but I think in this particular case, it requires a lot of over-explanation because it's mostly just angry, loud people that haven't taken the time to try and figure out what's going on. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.